Good morning, everyone. We have with us today TG Wolff, and she writes mysteries that play within the gray area between good and bad and right and wrong. Um, Mostly puzzles, and they give you everything you need to solve her mysteries. Diverse characters mirror the complexity of real life and real people, balanced with a healthy dose of entertainment and a lot of wit. So, welcome, Tina.
Thank you. This is the first time I've ever done anything video, so this is a new experience for me. This is an interesting first experience as it looks like it's frozen.
Oh, you froze there for a second.
I thought you froze for a second. I am in a hotel, so perhaps I don't have very good streaming, but I upgraded. I paid to upgrade.
Oh, that's good. We'll just keep going and make
Yeah,
this work. So, let's get started. Let's first talk about some of the books that you've written.
yeah.
The first series that I read was Diamond series, and I loved Widow's Run. So, can you tell us a little bit about Diamond and this series?
So when we would first meet Diamond in Widow's Run, she is a little bit insane, but deservedly so. The love of her life was killed in a car accident, and she had really stepped away from who she was. I shouldn't say it that way. She had been with the CIA and had been working some very intense jobs related to chemical weapons when she meets this nerdy professor who just sweeps her off her feet. And so she sets aside that part of her life and she kind of reinvents herself, becoming somewhat domesticated. And then when he dies, that rug is just torn out from under her. She learns about 6 months later that perhaps it wasn't the accident that everyone thought it was. And that really sends her down a spiral. She tries doing everything she can through the proper channels. And when that doesn't work, she starts her widow's run. And she's going to find out what happened to her husband.
It's a crazy premise, and I love the series, but I really got to know Diamond
Hmm.
through your podcast.
Mm,
And you read that whole book on
yes.
your podcast. That was a heck of a series.
That was a heck of a way to start a podcast. And as you know from doing things like this, when you start these things, you don't know what you don't know until you've
Yes.
done it. So, we look back now, and my son did the music for it, and we had such fun doing it.
Yeah.
I learned that I cannot do accents. I butchered them. They were horrible. Now they're just horribly funny. It's like listening to a B movie. Like, did she really do that? We had only two microphones, so Jack's playing on an acoustic piano, and he had to move it between the piano keys and himself. I was in our living room with the French door closed behind us, and like dogs still bark. But it was a really good book for that.
Yeah.
It was patterned a little bit after I had read the Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson series to my
Yeah.
boys when they were younger. And one of the things I loved about that series was that every chapter was a short story in and of itself, but also progressed the whole story forward.
Yeah.
And it was great for reading for kids because something happened in every chapter. And I was like, oh, I really want that. And I think you can see that I accomplished it by the way it did translate to a podcast
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
every episode essentially could be standalone.
It was perfect. And it really made me fall in love with Diamond. Absolutely. So that I grabbed every book as soon as they were released.
Oh, well, thank you.
But it also made me fall in love with your podcast, because you stepped from that into classic mysteries.
Yes.
And like you kind of reinvented those so that they fit
Yes.
and they worked. And we got to know Jack as a mastermind.
Yeah, the podcast has been a bit of a journey because once we finished with Widow's Run and the second book wasn't out yet, it was like, well, what do we do? And I have a great respect for the work that authors do, and so I went to the public domain because I really didn't understand the rules of what it takes to do an adaptation.
Right. Yeah.
So I ended up going back to the first stories. It was even before mystery was a genre. And so these come from the horror genre, the romance genre, where romance didn't mean what romance is today. And then was able to take those stories, some of them full-length books, and adapt them down into a 40-minute story. And then I think it was in season 3, did an adaptation of Tom Sawyer Detective
Yes.
by I just blinked on the author's name. Who is it? Who wrote Tom Sawyer?
Oh, I don't even
I
remember. I
was
am just
so embarrassing. But I loved his storytelling style. It was so
yeah.
conversational. It was amazing. And that really drove then how I formatted everything after that,
Hmm.
including the last 3 seasons where we've, as you know, we've been featuring original works by
Yeah.
current authors. So it's been a learning journey, both of technology, of style, of all of these great things that come together to tell a good story and to try to
Exactly.
stump Jack.
Well, and that's what I love about the books, because you put all of those together, but then you lay it out just like you do your
Yes,
podcast so that people can like try and figure it out,
yes.
um, which is great. But listening to Jack do it is amazing.
I have so many people say that are what we call our witty banter, which is code for not very witty sometimes. But the two of us going backwards, and he is playing the piano the entire time. So I give him so much credit. I don't know how he pays attention to what I say at all, because he has no prior knowledge of what is
Mhm.
going on. That's why sometimes he'll be like, I wasn't listening. It's like recap it all. And I'm thinking one time he guessed it was a trebuchet. Like you just never know where he's gonna go. So for
Yeah,
this season, I started keeping score. And as of this moment, it's tied 2-2 with Jack versus the authors.
oh, yeah, but that means because I didn't get to listen to Friday's episode, so that means he guessed yours. Playing
um,
dead.
no, that was the toe tag. So
Yeah,
the
you're right.
episode, the full episode that just dropped was called Hard Scrabble by
Hmm.
Cam Rockwood. Cam has this amazing, just amazing life where she has worked as a factory worker, as a social worker, as a teacher. So her, her stories are a little bit Stephen Kingish in the sense of there's something lurking. You just never quite know what. And so Jack got the answer right-ish enough that we gave him the win because as all mystery lovers know, you don't have to be 100% right to be right. You just got to be mostly right.
How close can I get?
How close can you get?
Okay, so we are here today, though, to talk about Detective De La Cruz.
Yes,
And we have Playing Dead is your fourth book in that series.
that is correct. It's the
So, can
fourth.
you tell us a little bit about Detective De La Cruz?
Yeah, so Cruz was conceived many years ago, and I knew that I wanted a more traditional detective.
Hmm.
You know how it is when you're creating a character where I knew so much about his background. I knew he was a recovering alcoholic. I knew he was a workaholic, but I didn't have a face and I didn't have a name. And I went to a writers' conference, and one of the speakers was really encouraging people to write characters that were other than themselves. And it sounds sort of foolish, right? Because, of course, I would never think that I couldn't write a male character, but I didn't really think that I could write a Puerto Rican character. My heritage is Italian and Slovak. And yet I grew up in a neighborhood that was mixed. It was, I guess you would say, white and Hispanic, with white being Italian and Polish. Um, I,
Hmm.
I'm sure there was some Irish and stuff mixed in. But my best friend growing up was Puerto Rican, and the school I went to, the class was about half half. So I really knew, I grew up with families like De La Cruz's. And my Italian American family is very much like De La Cruz's. So once I had that piece that he was Puerto Rican, somehow the name Jesus de la Cruz just popped in my head. And it was like you could do so much with it. And he hates his name. He hates his name because people are like, "Hey, Jesus, can you walk on water for me?" It's like,
Oh,
talk about a mother giving you like high aspirations. It's like,
here's the bar, kid.
yeah. Yeah. So when we first meet him, he's about 3 years after a very bad accident on the job, where he had to deal with his alcoholism, and he also no longer could do the job that he was doing, which was an undercover or narcotics position, and he ends up in homicide. And when we first meet him in Exacting Justice, it's the start of his first big case, which is called the drug head killer. So throughout the series of books, we've seen him mature as a person as he goes from very much being sort of a loner to getting pulled into friendships, to being, grasping onto a relationship with a beautiful woman, and kind of see him taking control of his life in a next step after conquering alcohol.
Wow. That's a big journey through these cases that he's gone through.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about Playing Dead. And the mystery is about Alexander Rotten Carter.
Mhm.
Why is this a big deal, and what makes it pivotal?
Now, this book, I think I might have done a little bit of the writerly thing where you sort of back yourself into a corner, but you don't realize you back yourself into a corner. So this book very much ties up some loose ends from the previous. I hope I did a good enough job that that readers could pick it up and read it, but it very much does tie off some strings.
Mhm.
So in the previous book, um, there was a car accident that killed Detective Matt Yablonsky's wife.
Okay.
And Cruz's girlfriend Aurora was in that accident too, and she was hurt pretty badly. And it was suspected that Rotten Carter caused it. And it was suspected because Rotten's sister had died, who was a confidential informant for Yablonsky. So Cruz and Yablonsky and really the whole of the Cleveland Police Department had been looking to get the evidence to pin this accident, not accident, on Carter, and they hadn't been able to do it. He'd been very elusive. Um, and so when he shows up dead in Cruz's neighborhood, it sets off all kind of alarms. And it was an interesting story to write because I had to deal with the complexities of a killer who would do something as outrageous as dress up a body as the King of Hearts, and yet tie everything back to the previous threads that I had left. So it was a challenging book to write. I recently reread it after having put it down for about 4 or 5 months, and I found myself laughing, and I found myself still entertained. So I'm like, okay, I took a little comfort that this is a fun story to read. Sometimes you get so much in your head after the amount of time it takes to write them that you're like, man, I don't, I'm not sure what people are going to think, but I'm pretty
And
much
so,
a harsh critic.
so you really should read the books in order, when you go through his series, to see his character build and the.
Right. With except for this one, I'm sorry. In books 1, 2, and 3, the mysteries do stand alone.
Mhm.
The character growth and the character arc, those do continue through all the books. So it really depends what kind of reader you are. If you read something just for the mystery and you tend to, fluff over the family stuff, then you probably don't need to read all of them to get to where you need to be for this one. Maybe the one right before, which
Mhm.
was Raising Stakes.
Yes.
But if you're somebody who really likes to get into the characters' lives, then you do want to read from the beginning. And the reason I wrote him this way, I mean, I have a day job. I love writing, but I am not to the point yet where this is my career. And so, I'm juggling. I'm married. I have two kids. I have a full-time day job, and then, I kill people for a hobby. And everybody I know has these different parts of their lives. And so, trying to mirror that in this book, but in a humorous way, because there's so much humor in life. I recently went to an airport where I was serviced by oh shoot, the guy who parks cars,
Ballet?
a valet who didn't know cars. And so he's looking at my car and he's like, "What kind of car is that? An Audi? How do you spell that?" I'm just dying inside. I'm like, that is going in a book. Do you ever have a valet who doesn't know cars? Like a florist who didn't know flowers. And so it's these little bits of humor that make every day so entertaining is what I wanted to put in this book. So it wasn't just like, Cruz went to work, Cruz did this. It's like Cruz had to deal with, his mother saying, "When are you gonna get married?" Oh goodness.
And so you said that this mirrors like your family life and the things that you've experienced. Why Cleveland then? Are you
I'm originally from Cleveland. I spent more than the first 40 some years of my life there. And with the first book, Exacting Justice, the killer took drug dealers' heads and put them on stakes, a la Vladimir the Impaler. And so I needed a city that I intimately knew so that I could do that.
yeah.
And so it was only natural to go back to Cleveland. I'm sure many people experienced it. Like, when I was 16 and got my license, I drove everywhere. So there's no place I know like I know Cleveland.
Mhm.
And it was kind of fun then. I would do some Google searching to try to figure out where the actual city boundaries are, but then they would be places that I knew. And so once that was said, of course, you had to keep the setting. But I've still been able to then interweave my favorite parts of the city. Little Italy shows up a lot. I did my undergrad degree at Case Western Reserve, so you'll see Case pop up a lot. I did my master's degree at Cleveland State, so you'll see Cleveland State pop up a lot. So just my favorite parts of the city then, the ones that I really spent a lot of time in, especially in my 20s and 30s, you'll see reoccurring neighborhoods show back up.
That's amazing. So do you have like a mascot in this series? I know in Widow's Run and the Diamond series that Robin's popped up a lot. So what about this? Is there something special about the series that is a humorous kind of mascot?
It really is the family. The family is totally offsetting the seriousness and the heaviness of the crimes. He has two nieces. One, Gabrielle, is the sweet, quiet niece, and the younger one, Ria, was just born loud. And she has a line as Cruz and Aurora are looking for a house. She's like, "Is there going to be a room in there for me?" And he's like, "Well, of course, sweetheart. There's always going to be room for me, for you." And she's then like, "Paint it pink, please." you know. Yeah, she later asked them when they're going to have babies, and Aurora's a school teacher, so she's used to this, and she's like, "Well, we're going to get married first, and then babies will come along." And she's like, "Well, I just wish you guys would get to it." She's like, "I need the babysitting money. I need to buy skins in my game, and I can't do it." And it's like just the random thinking of a child that totally offsets this very serious problem.
Oh, she sounds like so much fun.
She's fun to write, and sometimes I have to remember to give her sister sort of equal time
Mhm.
because a quieter character is actually the more challenging character to write. It having somebody, and so many of us are introverted. I do tend to think my ideas out loud, but I have a number of friends who don't, and to be able to give that type of character the screen time that they need to really show themselves when they're not going to do it verbally is a
Yeah.
challenge for an author.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Um, so this book is a mystery,
Yes.
100% where like you dive in and try and figure out who the culprit really is.
Hmm.
And most of your books are mysteries.
Yes.
Um, but you have a very specific genre feeling. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and the categories and why
Yeah.
you feel that way?
So I love puzzles. I
Mhm.
love them whether they are math, whether they are written, whether they are picture. And so creating a mystery is in itself a puzzle to figure out how to craft one and then to be able to solve it. So the more traditional whodunits, I think I froze again, or you froze. Just give it a minute to buffer here. Hmm. Are you there, Gina? Hmm. Ooh, that's not good. Hello, are you back? Am I
Yeah,
back? I really don't know what happened. I apologize.
that's okay.
So, we were starting to talk about mysteries
Yes.
and how I just love puzzles. And so the who done it to me is a classic puzzle style. Now, I will admit that Playing Dead doesn't quite fit into that who done it because it's tying together
Mhm.
the strings from the last books. But pretty much every other book, all of the Diamond books, the first three in the Cruz books, they are essentially whodunits. All of the stories in the last couple seasons of the podcast are whodunits. Um, I don't tend to write thrillers, honestly, because I don't feel knowledgeable enough or qualified enough to do the physical interactions that's needed with a thriller.
Mhm.
I don't know how to fight. The most I could do probably would have a character shoot a gun. And so I just don't feel like I have the chops to write that. I know some people think, especially with the pacing of the Diamond, that they feel a little bit more thriller-esque. But if you really break down some of the elements, it doesn't wholly satisfy what a thriller is. Um,
It has some suspense and stuff in it too. I mean, there's a lot of action.
There is a
Um,
lot of action, and that's what I think kind of takes it from feeling like a mystery, because mysteries tend to be, detectives that are maybe one step removed. You're kind of going very, very methodically through it. And with Diamond especially, she's racing through it. And so that pace drives that sense of being a thriller or of being suspense. With Cruz, we have the offset of the mystery with more of the humor and banter of the family lifestyle and the,
yeah,
and the stress that comes with it. So I think those feel a little bit more like a mystery, a traditional mystery, but still it's a more complete telling of a life. So here's again where I think readers who like to really get to know their detectives are going to like Cruz,
mhm.
and people who are really in it just for the mystery puzzle and get all the other stuff out of the way, this might not be their favorite book. They might find that there's too much in between, the actual mystery scenes.
Too much personality.
Too much personality.
So where are the lines between mystery and suspense and thriller? Because I never really focused on genre until
Yeah.
you talked about it in one of your episodes, probably when you were doing the mysteries. And I was like, I really never thought about the columns
Yeah.
of how different they are.
Right. And as you know, with anything, when you start trying to categorize things, there are blurry lines, not firm
Yes.
lines in between. And
Mhm.
I tried to do some research on this as I was, building things because I wanted to categorize it so people could find what they loved. And what I got is that in a mystery, the investigator is generally somewhat detached. They're investigating, but they're not wholly involved. Whereas with a thriller, the thrill comes from the investigator being under some threat, under some
Yeah.
timetable. So right there, you get the two very different elements of mystery and thriller.
Mhm.
Throughout these, Cruz is really never in danger. His life is never in danger. As opposed to when you think about some of the thriller ones, they're being shot at, they're being chased, they're being whatever it is. When you go to more classic mysteries like Poirot and stuff, it's always this one step removed from
Mhm.
whatever the crime is. And then when you get suspense, there is a sense of impending doom, but you don't actually know what it is. One of the other ways that thrillers build thrill is that the reader will often know something that the investigator doesn't know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
as a detective is approaching a closed door, the reader may know what's on the other side of it. And so that builds that sense of suspense, that sense of thrill. Where in a detective, it's usually very straightforward. So, humor technically is not part of any of these. And yet you can build them into any of them.
Yeah.
And you think of some of the most fun things. I don't know why Deadpool, came to mind, but it's like it's the irreverence and the fun that keeps you watching through the
Yes.
action scenes. So yes, I tend to be wholly in the mystery category, but my pacing tends to really push that line toward the other genres. But if you really looked at a well-crafted thriller versus mine, you would see mine is not a thriller.
Wow. That gives me a lot to think about. And I guess with the personality aspects, I'm going to have to start with book one, with Detective De La Cruz, because
Yes.
his family is going to be important.
His family is very important. He grew up his dad died when he was a teenager, so he grew up with a single mom, and he
Mhm.
has a sister who's just 2 years younger. So they grew up very close, but they also, the two siblings grew up somewhat independent because their mother was working in a hospital, and so she
Yeah.
worked a lot of evenings. And I think all of us, our upbringing meshes into how we act as adults. And it did very much for Cruz. While having to be independent at such a young age made him the person he is, it also, especially in the first books, he is someone who very much thinks that he has to do things on his own.
Yeah.
And so some of the lessons that he learns is just because you ask for help doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart. It means you know that there's a lot more knowledge out there than you have yourself. So you
Yeah.
see him growing in that way, becoming a better leader, becoming a better partner.
Wow. I can't wait to get to know him. Thank you so much for sharing. I know you have some other meetings to get to,
I
but
do have a busy day. Thank you
thank
for
you so
squeezing
much
me in
for,
yours.
we love having you. And I can't wait to listen to your next podcast.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope that the technical glitches didn't ruin things too much for the audience.
Oh,
Thank you all for joining in and getting to meet me. I really appreciate your time.
we appreciate having you. And I am very excited. I will put links to your website and where to get your books in the show notes so that everybody can grab your books.
Great. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you so much, and we will talk to you again soon.
All right. Bye-bye, Gina.